All right. Will Canada's latest measures, sending two observers to Crimea and imposing new sanctions on the Yanukovych, the former government there, the Yanukovych government, have any effect? What will bring this crisis to an end? James Bezan, Parliamentary Secretary, Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is in Ukraine, is with me. Paul Dewar, of course, from the NDP Foreign Affairs critic, is here. And John McCallum, the Liberal Citizenship and Immigration critic, is with me. Good to see you, gentlemen. Can you tell me, Mr. Bezan, exactly how the Prime Minister came to announce these new measures? What went into his thinking behind these new measures against Ukraine?
Well, he earlier today, actually, Prime Minister Harper had a discussion with Prime Minister Tusk of Poland, talking about how he'll continue to cooperate with the OSCE, with the European Union, G7, and other like-minded nations. And so today we've come out with the decision to join the OSCE observer mission that involves two unarmed military personnel from each of the OSCE countries. So all 18 countries are sending representatives, and they'll be on the ground, my understanding, immediately, and they'll be there for some time. The other thing is that the Prosecutor General of Ukraine has put in the formal request now of Canada and the European Union and other nations to begin freezing assets of people associated with the Yanukovych regime, because all those dollars, of course, were illicitly stolen from the treasury and the economy of Ukraine.
All right, I want to get Paul Dewar and John McCallum's view. I did just hear from Tom Mulcair extensively on this. Paul Dewar, what do you make of how the government has dealt with this and their latest maneuvers?
Well, we support it. I mean, I had written to Minister Baird to ask him and the government to push on the OSCE to actually provide observers. They've done that. We were pushing for sanctions against Yanukovych and his gang, and that's going to happen. We wanted to see alignment and synchronicity with our friends in the European Union, so that's very important. What's disturbing, of course, is the news we just heard in Crimea, where we have intimidation of UN officials. And Evan, one thing that we need to see is many different diplomatic pressure points here. I don't know if you caught it, but people who have the chance should look at the UN Security Council deliberations of Monday night. I had a chance to watch them. It put Russia, on in a corner in a sense to make them accountable. So that's important to have this at the UN Security Council, which is an item that can be brought forward time and time again, and Russia can't veto that. And finally, looking at within the G7, of course, and Mr. Mulcair asked that question of the Prime Minister yesterday, and he said that he'd be pursuing actions therein. So other than, we don't agree with the analogies in history, perhaps, but we agree on the actions that the government's taken so far.
Mr. McCallum, your view on what happened today, and maybe even reports of a NATO special envoy forced out of Crimea by armed men, and maybe concern for the safety of those two Canadian observers?
Well, look, I think this is a rare example of nonpartisanship, and the three parties have the same view on the Russian aggression and the same basic view on what Canada should do. I think we all would express concern for any lack of safety of Canadians over there. But I think the one dimension that the others haven't mentioned yet is the economic side, maybe because I'm an economist, but I think partly because the previous government took a lot of money out of the Treasury and for other reasons, Ukraine is hovering on the brink of bankruptcy. They need billions of dollars, not millions of dollars, and a lot of that will be from the IMF. So I think there's a sense of urgency. Canada's a part of the IMF for that money to be dispersed, albeit with conditions, because they have to be solvent, they have to be viable economically as well as in other ways, and I think that's still largely an unanswered question.
Mr. Bezan, what about that? The EU's offered Ukraine $15 billion in financial aid, provided the country reaches a deal with the IMF, as John McCallum's spoken about. The IMF's lent them a lot of money before, $37 billion, and that has not actually gone well because the IMF didn't think that the former Ukraine government functioned according to the so-called strings attached, some of them austerity strings. Will Canada put up some money? Can we tell when we'll put up some money and put it on the table to help Ukraine?
Well, I can tell you that in our meetings last week, Minister Baird offered our assistance through the IMF process, as well as offering the election observation observers. So we're going to make sure that there's going to be a lot of Canadians, as we've done in the past, for both short-term and long-term monitoring. So you know, there is a lot of things at play here. The IMF technical team are on the ground and will be there till the 14th of March. At that time, they'll be making recommendations back. And of course, the IMF is not only someone that's going to be able to provide the proper funding mechanisms and also loans, but it also helps trigger things like the World Bank and other organizations and provide guidance to countries on any one-on-one bilateral monies that they wish to donate as well.
But is there any concern, given the past financial history with Ukraine, about relending more money here? What makes you sure that, you know, billions of dollars, I know they need it, I know it's essential, Russia's also offered money. Is this a case of whoever provides money to that government will have the influence?
Well, you know, when we were there, the one thing that became apparent, because the Treasury is bare and all the money has been stolen, is that there haven't been any salaries paid to government workers, which includes the universities and schools. There hasn't been any pension dollars paid for over a month. So it is critical that we do get money flowing in there. And definitely the new transitional government and the acting president are well aware that there is going to be expectations from the standpoint of accountability. One of the reasons that they're in power today and when Yanukovych was forced into exile was because of this corruption, and they understand that they have to bring in anti-corruption laws, that they have to become a lot more transparent and accountable to the people and to the world in how they deal with these international funds.
I've got about a minute. Mr. Dewar and Mr. McCallum, what's your biggest fear? What's your biggest concern going forward, Mr. Dewar?
Well, that we see what happened a couple of days ago reoccur. That is the temperature being turned up, and we hear people talking about, from Moscow, talking about the use of military intervention. The other concern is that we've seen that dissipate, but we have to keep, as I said before, a full press on diplomacy. And on the IMF, I think we also have to be clear with the IMF. You can't come in and start dictating terms to, you know, to undermine social programs or to give assistance to everyday people. And that's a strong voice we have in the IMF, and we need to be stating very clear what the goals are. That's to get the economy going again. As has been mentioned, it's been pilfered by the previous regime. But to make sure the IMF doesn't go in and say, oh, well, you know, we have to cut these programs for health and social assistance, etc., that we have to jumpstart this economy. And a lot of money has to go in fairly quickly. And I think that's our focus should be coordinating with our friends in the IMF to do that. Mr.
McCallum, what's your greatest fear going forward?
Well, my greatest fear is that the Russian military will move further westwards and possibly attempt to take over the whole country. That clearly has not happened yet, but if you ask my greatest fear, that would probably be it, and something might induce them, or it might be self-induced. Or another variation on that is what some have called the Finlandization of Ukraine, whereby it's not exactly a military occupation, but the country is constrained not to open up more relationships with the West. That would also be a bad outcome. So as others have said, it's extremely unstable. We don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. We're doing everything we can to prevent these things from happening. But if you say, what is our greatest fear, I guess that's my answer to your question.
All right, I got to leave it there. James Bezan, Paul Dewar, and John McCallum, we're all watching the situation in Ukraine unfold. I appreciate your time, sirs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up on this program, would a Parti Québécois majority mean another referendum on independence? The CBC's Catherine Cullen is here next with what's at stake with the Quebec election. April 7th, put that on your calendar. It was called today. Stay with us.